Elena Cortez returned to Redemption Valley with nothing but exhaustion in her bones and a secret in the shape of a 4-year-old boy with his father's amber eyes. When James Blackwood saw his own reflection in the child's face, 5 years of anger shattered into a recognition that would change all their lives forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Redemption Valley as Elena Cortez's stagecoach rattled over the final stretch of rutted road. 5 years had passed since she had fled this place with nothing but a hastily packed valise and a heart shattered beyond recognition. Now she was returning, bone-weary and carrying far more than when she'd left. Her fingers absently stroked the dark curls of the sleeping 4-year-old boy whose head rested in her lap. Samuel, her son, the son whose existence James Blackwood knew nothing about. The stagecoach hit a particularly deep rut, jolting Elena from her thoughts and causing Samuel to stir. His eyes, the exact shade of warm amber as his father's, blinked open in momentary confusion. "Are we there yet, Mama?" he asked, his small voice carrying the remnants of sleep. "Almost, mi corazon," she replied, smoothing his unruly curls. "Just a few more minutes." Samuel sat up, pressing his face against the dusty window. The sprawling pasture land of Redemption Valley spread before them, golden in the waning light. In the distance, the modest cluster of buildings that comprise the town came into view. "Is this where you grew up, Mama?" Samuel asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Elena nodded, unable to trust her voice with words. What could she tell this innocent child about the place that had given her both her greatest joy and deepest sorrow? How could she explain that they were returning not by choice, but by desperate necessity? The death of her father in San Francisco had left Elena with mounting debts and nowhere to turn. Her position as a school teacher had been insufficient to cover both their living expenses and Samuel's medical treatments for his recurring lung ailments. The doctor had suggested the drier climate of the frontier might improve the boy's health, but Elena knew the truth was simpler and more painful. She had nowhere else to go. As the stagecoach rolled into town, Elena felt the weight of memories pressed down upon her shoulders. Nothing had changed, yet everything was different. The general store where she'd once purchased ribbons for her hair, the church where she had expected to be married, the schoolhouse where she had taught before her hasty departure, all stood as permanent fixtures in a life that had moved on without her. The coach came to a stop outside the Wayfarers Inn, the same establishment where stagecoaches had always delivered their passengers. Elena gathered her meager belongings and helped Samuel down from the carriage. His small hand clutched hers tightly as they faced the curious stares of townspeople who had stopped to observe the newcomers. "Elena? Elena Cortez, is that really you?" Martha Reynolds, the owner of the millinery shop and one of the town's most notorious gossips, approached with undisguised astonishment. Her eyes moved from Elena's face to Samuel and back again, questions forming visibly behind her scrutinizing gaze. "Hello, Mrs. Reynolds," Elena replied, summoning what dignity she could. "Yes, it's me." "Well, I never thought we'd see you back in Redemption Valley," Martha said, her tone carrying the unmistakable edge of judgment. Her eyes settled on Samuel again. "And who might this young man be?" Elena drew Samuel closer to her side. "This is my son, Samuel." Martha's eyebrows shot upward, and Elena could practically see the calculations being made, the counting of years, the forming of conclusions that would spread through town faster than a prairie fire. "We've had a long journey," Elena said firmly. "If you'll excuse us, we need to find lodging." Before Martha could respond, a deep voice cut through the gathering tension. "Your father's house has been kept up." Elena's heart stuttered in her chest. She would know that voice anywhere, had heard it in her dreams and nightmares for 5 long years. Slowly, she turned to face James Blackwood. He stood several paces away, tall and imposing as ever, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. The years had added silver threads to his dark hair at the temples, and new lines framed his eyes, but he was unmistakably the same man who had claimed her heart, and then, in her understanding, betrayed her beyond forgiveness. "James," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. His eyes, those piercing amber eyes that Samuel had inherited, moved from her face to the child at her side. Something flashed across his expression: confusion, realization, shock, before his features settled into the carefully neutral mask she remembered from the days when everything had fallen apart between them. "As executor of your father's will, I've maintained the property," he continued formally. "Legally, it belongs to you now. The key is with Harlan at the general store." Elena couldn't speak. She had prepared herself for many versions of this inevitable encounter, but not for James's cool efficiency, nor for the disturbing lack of questions about Samuel. "Thank you," she finally said. "That's unexpectedly kind." A muscle twitched in his jaw. It wasn't kindness, it was obligation. The words landed like physical blows. Elena tightened her grip on Samuel's hand, drawing strength from the innocent touch. "Who are you?" Samuel asked suddenly, looking up at James with undisguised curiosity. James's composed expression faltered as he looked down at the boy. For a heartbeat, Elena saw raw emotion in his eyes before he mastered himself again. "I'm Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice gentler than it had been with Elena. "I own the ranch north of town." Samuel's eyes widened. "With horses and cows and everything?" A ghost of a smile touched James's lips. "Yes, horses and cows and everything." The simple exchange sent a tremor through Elena's heart. The similarities between father and son were unmistakable. The same inquisitive tilt of the head, the same direct gaze. How could James not see it? Or did he see and simply not care? "We should get settled before dark," Elena said, breaking the moment. "Thank you for the information about my father's house." James nodded, his eyes lingering on Samuel for another moment before returning to Elena's face. "People will talk," he said quietly, the warning clear in his tone. "They always do." "Let them," Elena replied with more confidence than she felt. "It's nothing I haven't endured before." Something that might have been regret flickered across his features before he touched the brim of his hat in a formal gesture of farewell. "Good evening, Miss Cortez." Elena watched him walk away, his long strides carrying him quickly toward the livery where his horse would be waiting. Only when he had disappeared from view did she release the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I like him," Samuel declared. "He looks like the cowboys in my picture book." Elena closed her eyes briefly against the pain of those innocent words. "Yes, he does." She squeezed his hand gently. "Come on, let's go find Mr. Harlan and get the key to our new home." As they walked toward the general store, Elena felt the weight of stairs following them. By morning, everyone in Redemption Valley would know that Elena Cortez had returned with a child who bore a striking resemblance to James Blackwood. The speculation would be merciless, the judgment swift, but she had no choice. This was the only place left for them, the only chance for Samuel to grow up healthy and strong. Whatever pain awaited her in facing the past she had fled, she would endure it for her son, for the child who had never known his father, for the man who had never known he had a son. Harlan Peterson's weathered face registered shock when Elena entered his general store, but to his credit he recovered quickly. The storekeeper had always been kind to her, one of the few who hadn't openly taken sides when the scandal erupted years ago. "Elena Cortez," he said, setting aside the inventory ledger he'd been reviewing. "Welcome home." The simple greeting, free of judgment, nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Harlan. I understand you have the key to my father's house?" "That I do." His gaze moved to Samuel, who was busy examining the candy jars lined up on the counter. "And who might this young man be?" "This is my son, Samuel." Elena placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Samuel, this is Mr. Harlan. He has sweets that are almost as good as the ones in San Francisco." Samuel looked up, his amber eyes bright with interest. "Do you have lemon drops, sir?" Harlan chuckled. "Indeed I do, young man." He reached beneath the counter and produced a small paper bag. "Consider these a welcome gift." As Samuel accepted the candy with delighted thanks, Harlan's eyes met Elena's over the boy's head. The unspoken question hung in the air between them, but unlike Martha Reynolds, the storekeeper had the decency not to ask. "James Blackwood has kept your father's place in good order," he said instead, retrieving a key from a drawer. "Hired the Wilkins boy to tend the garden and make repairs when needed. Said it was the proper thing to do." Elena accepted the key, her fingers closing around the cool metal. "That was unexpected." Harlan's expression softened. "James Blackwood isn't the man you left behind, Elena. Life changes, folks, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse." She wasn't ready to discuss James. Not here, not with anyone. "We should get settled before dark. What do I owe you for the candy?" "Not a cent," Harlan insisted. "And Elena, for what it's worth, I'm glad you've come home. This town needs more good hearts, especially in the schoolhouse. Mrs. Finch, who's been teaching since you left." He made a face. "Let's just say the children would benefit from your return to that position." Elena managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Harlan, but I don't know if that would be welcome. You might be surprised." He nodded toward Samuel. "That boy looks like he's got a good head on his shoulders, just like his mama." And his father, Elena thought, but kept the words to herself. The walk to her father's house took them past the schoolhouse. Samuel paused, studying the modest building with its bell tower and small playground. "Is that where you used to teach?" he asked. "Yes." Elena swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "I taught children not much older than you." Samuel considered this with the serious expression that sometimes made him seem older than his years. "When I get better, will I go to school there?" The question caught her off guard. They hadn't discussed how long they would stay, though Elena knew their options were limited. "Perhaps. Would you like that?" He nodded. "I want to learn everything and make friends." His voice grew quieter. "I didn't have many friends in San Francisco." The admission broke her heart. Samuel's frequent illnesses had kept him isolated from other children, confined to their small apartment during the worst of his breathing episodes. The doctor had warned that the damp San Francisco air was exacerbating his condition, but Elena had clung to the city as long as she could, fearing the consequences of returning to Redemption Valley. "You'll make friends here," she promised, praying it was true. Would the sins of the parents be visited upon the child? Would the town's judgment extend to her innocent son? Her father's house appeared around the bend, a modest two-story structure set back from the road. The sight of it hit Elena with unexpected force. This was the home of her childhood, the place where she had grown from girl to woman under her father's stern but loving care. The garden was neat, the paint fresh, the porch swept clean. James had indeed maintained the property well. Inside, the house was just as Elena remembered, though emptier. Her father's favorite chair remained by the fireplace, his pipe rack on the mantel, but many of the smaller items, the trinkets and personal effects that had made the house a home, were gone, presumably sold to settle debts or distributed according to his will. Samuel explored the rooms with cautious curiosity while Elena checked the kitchen. To her surprise, The pantry contained basic provisions: flour, sugar, coffee, canned goods, enough to see them through the first few days. Another courtesy from James, or perhaps Harlan's doing. "Mama, whose room is this?" Samuel called from upstairs. Elena found him in her old bedroom, which remained largely as she had left it. The patchwork quilt her mother had made still covered the bed. The small writing desk where she had penned hopeful letters to James during their courtship stood beneath the window. Only the letterbox was missing, the carved wooden container where she had kept his replies. "This was my room when I was younger," she explained. Samuel bounced experimentally on the bed. "It's bigger than our room in San Francisco." "Yes, it is." She smiled at his simple delight. "This whole house is ours now." "Forever?" he asked, suddenly serious again. Elena sat beside him on the bed. "I don't know, mi corazon, for now at least." "Because of the bad men who wanted our money in San Francisco?" Her heart clenched. Even at 4, Samuel had understood more than she realized about their precarious situation. The increasingly threatening visits from creditors, the desperate calculations at the kitchen table late at night. "We're safe here," she assured him, though she wasn't entirely certain it was true. Physical safety, perhaps, but emotional safety, that remained to be seen. After a simple meal from the pantry provisions, Elena tucked Samuel into her childhood bed. The journey had exhausted him, and his breathing was labored from the dust of travel. She administered the medicine the San Francisco doctor had provided, relieved when his breathing eased into the steady rhythm of sleep. Downstairs, Elena sat in her father's chair, finally allowing the tears she had held at bay all day to fall. The weight of returning pressed down upon her, the memories, the whispers that would follow her, the inevitable confrontation with the past she had fled. And James, the shock of seeing him had been greater than she'd anticipated. 5 years had not diminished the effect he had on her, though she had convinced herself that the love she'd once felt had died the day she discovered his betrayal. But now, there was Samuel, the living embodiment of what they had once shared, the secret she had kept, first out of anger and pain, then out of fear and pride. James had a right to know his son. Samuel had a right to know his father. Yet the thought of telling him, of reopening the wounds that had driven her away, filled Elena with dread, with, what if James rejected Samuel as he had rejected her? What if he demanded rights she wasn't prepared to give? What if the truth destroyed the fragile new beginning she was trying to build? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the old house like restless spirits seeking entrance. Elena wrapped her arms around herself and closed her eyes, exhaustion finally claiming her as the first difficult day of her return came to an end. Elena woke to the sound of Samuel's cough. The harsh, rattling noise sent her bolting upright, her heart pounding as she rushed to his bedside. The boy's face was flushed, his forehead warm to the touch. "It's just the dust from traveling," she murmured, more to reassure herself than him. "Let's get your medicine." She administered the tincture the San Francisco doctor had prescribed, then held a cup of water to Samuel's parched lips. His breathing gradually eased, and the frightening flush receded from his cheeks. By the time the sun had fully risen, he was asking for breakfast, his illness apparently forgotten with the resilience only children possess. Elena wasn't so quick to dismiss the episode. Samuel's health had been the primary reason for leaving San Francisco, and she had prayed the dry desert air would strengthen his lungs. But what if the journey itself had worsened his condition? What if he needed medical attention beyond the remedies she carried? "Is there a doctor in town?" she asked casually as they ate the simple breakfast she'd prepared. Samuel looked up from his porridge. "Am I sick again, Mama?" "No, mi corazon," she assured him quickly. "I just want to know where to find help if we need it." After breakfast, Elena decided to venture into town. They needed fresh supplies, and she needed information about the town doctor, about potential employment, about how much the community knew of her return. Most importantly, she needed to understand what had changed in the 5 years of her absence, especially concerning James Blackwood. Redemption Valley looked different in the clear light of morning. The main street was busier than Elena remembered, with new businesses alongside familiar establishments. A bank now stood where the blacksmith shop had once been. The livery stable had expanded. Signs of prosperity were evident in the freshly painted storefronts and the well-maintained boardwalks. "Good morning, Miss Cortez." Elena turned to find Sheriff Miller approaching, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. The lawman had aged considerably, his hair now completely gray, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Sheriff," she acknowledged with a nod. "It's been a long time." "Indeed it has." His gaze moved to Samuel, who was watching a group of children playing near the schoolhouse. "Word travels fast in small towns. I understand congratulations are in order." Elena tensed. "This is my son, Samuel." The sheriff's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes softened. "Handsome boy. Got a look of his father about him." The statement hung between them, neither question nor accusation, yet demanding response all the same. "Samuel, why don't you go look at the toys in Mr. Harlan's window while I speak with the sheriff?" Elena suggested. When the boy was out of earshot, she faced the lawman squarely. "I assume you have something to say to me, Sheriff." Miller sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through his thinning hair. "Just this. Redemption Valley isn't the same town you left, Elena. Some folks have moved on. Others have come to understand that life rarely fits into neat little boxes of right and wrong. And James." The question escaped before she could stop it. "James Blackwood has become the most influential man in the county, doubled the size of his ranch, serves on the town council, donates generously to the church and school." Miller replaced his hat. "He's respected, and alone." Elena absorbed this information, unsure how it made her feel. "And Margaret Carson? Did she and James—" "Margaret left for Denver not long after you did. Married a banker there, from what I hear." The sheriff's gaze was knowing. "The engagement you ran from never happened, Elena." The revelation struck her like a physical blow. Margaret Carson, the beautiful, wealthy rancher's daughter whose impending engagement to James had devastated Elena, had never married him after all. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I saw them together. I heard them discussing wedding plans." "Perhaps you didn't hear everything," Miller suggested gently. "Perhaps there was more to the story than you knew." Before Elena could respond, Samuel's excited voice called her attention. "Mama, look!" He was pointing toward the far end of the street where a rider was approaching, James Blackwood mounted on a magnificent black stallion. Even at a distance, his presence commanded attention. Several townspeople called out greetings as he passed, which he acknowledged with brief nods. Elena fought the urge to retreat. Sheriff Miller touched the brim of his hat in farewell, leaving her to face this encounter alone. James dismounted in front of the general store, tying his horse to the hitching post with practiced ease. He was reaching for something in his saddlebag when Samuel, overcome with a child's fascination for horses, darted across the street toward the magnificent animal. "Samuel!" Elena called in alarm, starting after him. The boy stopped beside the great black horse, his small hand reaching up tentatively toward its muzzle. James turned, surprise registering on his face at finding a child beside his mount. "Be careful," he said, his deep voice gentle but cautious. Thunder can be temperamental with strangers. But to Elena's astonishment, the stallion that had a reputation for allowing no one but James to handle him lowered his great head, nickering softly as Samuel's small fingers touched his velvety nose. "He likes me," Samuel announced with delight. James watched, something indefinable crossing his features. So he does. He glanced up, seeing Elena for the first time. Their eyes locked across the distance, and for a moment, the years between them seemed to vanish. "Is this your horse, Mr. Blackwood?" Samuel asked, breaking the spell. "Yes." James knelt to the boy's level, a gesture that seemed instinctive rather than calculated. "His name is Thunder. Because he's big and loud?" A smile tugged at the corner of James's mouth. "Something like that." Elena approached cautiously, torn between the need to protect her son and the strange fascination of watching these two together, father and son, though only she knew the truth of their connection. "I'm sorry," she said. "Samuel is very curious about animals." James stood, his height once again imposing. No harm done. He studied the boy with undisguised interest. "How old are you, Samuel?" 4.5, Samuel answered proudly. "I'll be 5 in November." Elena saw the brief calculation in James's eyes, saw the moment understanding dawned. November. 9 months after she had fled Redemption Valley. The color drained from his face and his gaze shot to hers, filled with questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Samuel, we should let Mr. Blackwood attend to his business," she said quickly. "We need to finish our shopping." "Can I pet Thunder again sometime?" Samuel asked, reluctant to leave the horse. Before Elena could respond, James found his voice. "You're welcome to visit my ranch," he said, the words directed at Samuel, but his eyes fixed on Elena. "Both of you. Sunday, perhaps." It wasn't really a request. It was a demand for answers, thinly disguised as hospitality. "We'll see," Elena replied non-committally, taking Samuel's hand. "Good day, Mr. Blackwood." As they walked away, she could feel James's gaze following them, heavy with unasked questions and dawning realization. The truth she had guarded for nearly 5 years was beginning to unravel, one innocent interaction at a time. Elena spent the remainder of the day in a state of anxious anticipation, expecting James to appear at her door demanding answers. When evening fell without his arrival, her nerves had frayed to breaking point. Samuel, oblivious to her distress, chattered excitedly about Thunder and the ranch he hoped to visit. "Do cowboys have lots of horses, Mama? Does Mr. Blackwood have children I can play with? Will there be other animals besides horses and cows?" Each innocent question twisted the knife of guilt deeper into Elena's heart. The enthusiasm in Samuel's voice, his natural curiosity about the ranch, about his father's world, highlighted the magnitude of what she had kept from both of them. "I don't know if we'll visit the ranch, mi corazon," she said gently, tucking him into bed. Samuel's face fell. "But Mr. Blackwood invited us, you heard him." "It's complicated, Samuel. Because I'm sick." His lower lip trembled slightly. "I promise I won't cough. I'll take all my medicine." Elena gathered him into her arms, her heart breaking at his assumption that his illness was the obstacle. "No, bebe, never think that. Your health is improving, and that's all that matters to me." "Then why can't we go? Don't you like Mr. Blackwood?" The innocent question struck at the heart of her dilemma. Did she like James Blackwood? Once, she had loved him with all the passionate intensity of youth. She had believed they would build a life together, had given herself to him completely in the barn during the harvest festival, secure in the promise of their future. Then had come the devastating discovery, or what she had believed was a discovery, of his secret engagement to Margaret Carson. "Mr. Blackwood and I knew each other a long time ago," she explained carefully. "Sometimes when grown-ups have history, it makes things difficult." Samuel's brow furrowed in concentration as he processed this. "Like when I broke Mrs. Wilson's vase in San Francisco and she was angry even after I apologized." Elena smiled despite herself. "Something like that, yes. But she forgave me eventually," Samuel persisted. "And then she gave me cookies." Adults are more complicated than broken vases and cookies, mi corazon. She kissed his forehead. Now sleep. We'll talk more tomorrow. After Samuel drifted off, Elena sat on the front porch watching darkness settle over Redemption Valley. The sheriff's words echoed in her mind. The engagement you ran from never happened, Elena. How could that be? She had seen James and Margaret together at the Carson Ranch, had overheard their discussion of wedding arrangements, had fled heartbroken before James could deliver the crushing blow himself. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted her thoughts. A rider appeared on the moonlit road, tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakable even in silhouette. James Blackwood had come after all. He dismounted in front of the house, securing Thunder to the hitching post. In the silvery moonlight, his features were cast in sharp relief, the strong jaw set in determination, the amber eyes that Samuel had inherited glinting with barely contained emotion. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Elena nodded, resigned. "Not here. Samuel is sleeping." They moved to the far end of the porch, maintaining a careful distance between them. The night air carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "He's mine, isn't he?" James's question was direct, his voice a low rumble that stirred memories Elena had tried desperately to suppress. There was no point in denial. "Yes." The single word seemed to hit James like a physical blow. He gripped the porch railing, knuckles white. "You left knowing you were carrying my child." "I didn't know when I left," Elena clarified, though the distinction felt meaningless now. "I discovered it a month later in Denver." "And you didn't think to send word?" The control in his voice was slipping, anger seeping through. "You denied me 5 years with my son. I believed you were engaged to Margaret Carson." The accusation burst from her with unexpected force. "I heard you discussing wedding plans at her father's ranch." James stared at her incredulously. "What are you talking about? Margaret and I never—" "I saw you together," Elena insisted. 2 weeks before the Harvest Festival. You were in her father's study. She was showing you invitations, discussing the ceremony." Understanding dawned slowly across James's features. "The Carson wedding," he said quietly. "Not mine, her brother's. I was helping with the cattle arrangements for the guests coming from out of town." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet as the scaffolding of her certainty began to crumble. "But you were so secretive. You canceled our plans twice that week. Because old man Carson insisted the wedding preparations be kept quiet until formal announcements were made. Some nonsense about social propriety." James ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I was bound by my word not to discuss it, even with you. I never imagined you'd jump to such conclusions. Then why didn't you come after me when I left?" The question that had haunted Elena for 5 years finally escaped. "I did." James's control finally shattered. "I rode to Denver the moment I realized you were gone. By then you'd already left for San Francisco. I sent letters to every school in the city, hired investigators. Nothing." Elena staggered back as though struck. "I never received any letters." "Because you weren't using your real name, were you?" James's voice was bitter now. The investigator discovered that much. Elena Cortez had vanished, replaced by Elena Ramirez. You didn't want to be found. It was true. Hurt and humiliated, believing herself betrayed, Elena had adopted her mother's maiden name in San Francisco. She had been determined to start fresh, to erase all connections to Redemption Valley and James Blackwood. "I thought you had chosen Margaret," she whispered, the justifications that had sustained her for 5 years suddenly sounding hollow even to her own ears. "I loved you." The raw pain in his voice pierced her defenses. "Only you, always you." The past tense wasn't lost on Elena. Loved, not love. A soft cry from inside the house interrupted their confrontation. Samuel's voice called out, thin with fear. "Mama." "He's having a nightmare," Elena said, already moving toward the door. "I need to go to him." James caught her arm, his touch sending an unwelcome jolt through her. "This isn't finished, Elena. Samuel is my son. I have rights." She met his gaze steadily. "And he has spent 4 years not knowing his father. Any changes will happen at his pace, not yours, not mine, his." To her surprise, James nodded, releasing her arm. "Sunday," he said. "Bring him to the ranch as we discussed. We'll start there." As Elena hurried to comfort their son, she felt the weight of 5 years of misunderstanding crushing down upon her. What might have been had she trusted James enough to confront him? What future might they have built together, the three of them? These questions had no answers, only the painful truth that they could never reclaim the years that had been lost. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the kind of autumn day that showcased Redemption Valley's stark beauty. Elena stood before her wardrobe, fingers tracing the limited selection of dresses she had brought from San Francisco. None seemed appropriate for the occasion. A visit to the ranch of the man whose heart she had broken, whose child she had hidden, whose life she had altered as irrevocably as her own. "Are we going to see the horses today, Mama?" Samuel appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his best shirt, his dark curls still damp from washing. Elena's heart constricted at his eagerness. "Yes, mi corazon, we're going to Mr. Blackwood's ranch." Samuel's face lit with excitement. "Will Thunder be there? Do you think Mr. Blackwood will let me ride him?" "Thunder is much too big for a little boy," Elena explained gently. "But perhaps Mr. Blackwood has smaller horses, more suitable for children." She finally selected a simple blue dress, modest but flattering. As she pinned her hair, Elena caught her reflection in the mirror. The years had changed her. The fresh-faced schoolteacher was gone, replaced by a woman whose eyes held the wisdom of hard choices and solitary struggles. Would James see the changes as she did? Would he recognize the ways in which motherhood and hardship had transformed her? They set out mid-morning, traveling in a borrowed wagon from Harlan's store. Samuel chattered continuously, his excitement growing with each mile. Elena listened with half an ear, her thoughts tumbling over one another in anxious anticipation. The Blackwood Ranch appeared on the horizon, larger and more prosperous than Elena remembered. The main house had been expanded, a new wing added to the eastern side. The barn had been rebuilt, twice the size of the original structure. Fenced pastures stretched in all directions, dotted with cattle and horses. Everything spoke of success, of a man who had channeled his energies into building something substantial. As they approached the main house, James emerged onto the porch. He had clearly been watching for their arrival. He wore a clean shirt and dark trousers, his usual work clothes replaced by attire more suited to receiving visitors. The effort wasn't lost on Elena. "Mr. Blackwood," Samuel called out, waving enthusiastically. "We came to see Thunder." James's face transformed as he smiled at the boy, the stern lines softening into something Elena had once known well. "Thunder's in the corral waiting to meet you properly," he replied, approaching the wagon. He helped Elena down first, his hands strong and sure around her waist. The brief contact sent unwelcome warmth through her, memories of more intimate touches threatening to surface. She stepped away quickly, focusing on helping Samuel. "Welcome to the Blackwood Ranch," James said formally, though his eyes never left Samuel. "I thought we might start with a tour. Would you like that, son?" The term of endearment slipped out naturally, and Elena saw James tense slightly, aware of his slip. But Samuel nodded eagerly, oblivious to the undercurrents between the adults. "Can we see Thunder first?" "Thunder first," James agreed with a gentle smile that transformed his features. "Then the other horses, the barn, and if you're interested, I have a surprise for you." Samuel's eyes widened. A surprise? What is it? If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, James replied, his voice warm with amusement. He glanced at Elena. I hope that's acceptable. She nodded, uncertain of her voice. This was a side of James she had known well once, the gentle, playful man beneath the stern rancher exterior. Seeing him interact with their son stirred emotions she had thought safely buried. The tour began at the corral where Thunder waited, his magnificent black coat gleaming in the sunlight. The stallion approached as James led Samuel to the fence, lowering his great head to the boy's level as if recognizing a kindred spirit. He remembers me, Samuel exclaimed with delight. He does, James confirmed, watching the interaction with evident wonder. Thunder doesn't take to many people. He must sense something special in you. Elena stood back, observing father and son together. The physical resemblance was striking. The same set of the shoulders, the same tilt of the head, the same expressive amber eyes. How had no one in town remarked on it yet? Or perhaps they had, in whispers not meant for her ears. From the corral, James led them to the barn where several gentle mares and their foals were housed. Samuel approached each one with reverent fascination, following James's instructions on how to offer his hand for the horses to sniff before attempting to pet them. You have a natural way with animals, James observed, pride evident in his voice, though he had known the boy for less than a day. My friend in San Francisco had a cat, Samuel explained seriously, but I've never had a pet of my own. Mama says animals need space to run and our apartment was too small. James glanced at Elena, a flash of something like accusation in his eyes before he masked it. Well, there's plenty of space here, which brings me to that surprise I mentioned. He led them to a smaller corral behind the barn where a shaggy pony grazed, its dappled coat catching the sunlight. This is Pepper, James said, opening the gate. She's gentle as a lamb and perfect for beginners. I thought you might like to have your first riding lesson today. Samuel's face transformed with wonder. A real riding lesson? On my own pony? For today, James clarified, his eyes meeting Elena's over the boy's head. If your mother approves. The unspoken message was clear. This could become permanent, a regular part of Samuel's life if Elena allowed it. The pony was an offering, not just to Samuel but to her, a demonstration of what James could provide for their son, what Samuel had missed in the confined spaces of city life. Please, Mama. Samuel turned to her, hope shining in his eyes. I'll be careful, I promise. How could she deny him this joy? Yes, but only if Mr. Blackwood stays right beside you the whole time. I won't let him fall, James promised, the words carrying weight beyond their immediate meaning. As James lifted Samuel onto the pony's back, showing him how to hold the reins and sit properly, Elena witnessed another version of the life they might have had, her son growing up on this ranch, learning horsemanship from his father, developing the confidence that came from mastering such skills. The sight brought a lump to her throat. For all her justifications, for all her certainty that she had made the only choice possible at the time, Elena could no longer deny the magnitude of what she had taken from both Samuel and James. Samuel's riding lesson lasted nearly an hour. James led the pony in slow circles around the corral, his patience seemingly endless as he instructed the boy on proper posture, how to signal the pony to stop, how to guide her with gentle pressure from his legs. Elena watched from the fence, struck by how naturally father and son interacted, as if the years of separation had never existed. Look, Mama, I'm riding by myself, Samuel called out, as James stepped back, allowing Pepper to walk a few steps with Samuel guiding her independently. You're a natural, just like your mother, James replied, pride evident in his voice. He glanced at Elena. You were always at ease on horseback, even when other town girls were afraid. The casual reference to their shared past caught Elena off guard. James rarely spoke of their time together, as if respecting an unspoken boundary. Now, watching him with their son, that boundary seemed to be crumbling. After the riding lesson, they moved to the shade of an enormous cottonwood tree where James had arranged a simple picnic lunch. The domestic scene, blankets spread beneath the tree, food laid out, the three of them seated together, struck Elena as surreally ordinary, a glimpse of family life they had never shared. "Do all these animals belong to you, Mr. Blackwood?" Samuel asked between bites of fresh bread and cheese. "Most of them," James answered. "Some belong to the men who work for me. The ranch is too big for one person to manage alone." "Did you always want to be a cowboy?" James smiled at the term. "I suppose I did. My father built this ranch from nothing, and I grew up loving the land, the animals, the life out here." His eyes met Elena's briefly. "Some things are in your blood. You can't escape them no matter how far you travel." The double meaning wasn't lost on her. Samuel had his father's affinity for horses, his connection to the land, qualities that had found no outlet in their cramped San Francisco existence. "Tell me about San Francisco," James said, directing the question to Samuel rather than Elena. "What was your favorite part of living there?" Samuel considered this seriously. "The ships in the harbor. Mama would take me to watch them on Sundays when she didn't have to teach. Some came from places so far away the sailors spoke languages I couldn't understand." "Did you enjoy your school there?" Samuel's expression fell slightly. "I didn't go to regular school. Mama taught me at home because I got sick too often." James's gaze sharpened, focusing on Elena. "Sick? What kind of sickness?" "A lung condition," Elena explained reluctantly. "The doctor said the damp air in San Francisco made it worse. That's partly why we came back to Redemption Valley. The drier climate should help strengthen his lungs." James studied his son with new concern. "Has he seen Doc Wilson yet?" "Wilson's good with respiratory ailments. Saved 3 of my ranch hands during the influenza outbreak 2 winters ago." "We haven't had time," Elena began. "Make time," James interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Tomorrow. I'll come for you in the morning and take you both to his office." The command in his voice stirred Elena's defiance. "I can manage my son's health care, James. I've been doing it alone for nearly 5 years." Samuel, sensing the tension, turned his attention to a butterfly that had landed nearby, giving the adults a moment of privacy. "And how has that worked out?" James asked, his voice low to avoid Samuel overhearing. "He's thin for his age, Elena. I can hear the wheeze in his breathing when he gets excited. He should have been raised here in clean, dry air with access to proper medical care." "Don't you dare judge me," Elena hissed, anger flaring. "You have no idea what I've endured to keep him safe, to provide for him, to be both mother and father, because you didn't give me the chance to be his father." The words escaped in a harsh whisper. James closed his eyes briefly, mastering his emotions before Samuel could notice. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, though the underlying hurt remained. "I'm not judging you. I'm concerned about my son's health, our son's health." The correction, the acknowledgement of their shared responsibility, deflated Elena's anger. "The San Francisco doctor gave us medication. It helps, but yes, he needs to see a local physician who understands the conditions here." James nodded, accepting her concession. "Wilson is the best. He'll help." As if on cue, Samuel returned to them, his eyes bright with excitement. "Can I see inside your house, Mr. Blackwood?" James rose, offering a hand to help Elena up, which she accepted after a moment's hesitation. "Of course. I think you'll find something interesting in there." The main house was cool and pleasant, far more comfortable than Elena remembered. James had made improvements: larger windows to capture the breeze, polished wooden floors, furniture that spoke of quality rather than mere function. It was a home designed for a family, not just a bachelor rancher. In the parlor, a small table held an unexpected treasure, a wooden train set carefully crafted and painted in bright colors. Samuel gasped at the sight, looking to his mother for permission before approaching it. "My father made this for me when I was about your age," James explained, kneeling beside Samuel. "I thought you might enjoy playing with it while you're here." While Samuel became absorbed in the toy, Elena explored the room, noting the changes. Her gaze caught on a framed photograph on the mantel, a much younger James standing beside a man who could only be his father, given the striking resemblance between them. "He would have loved to know his grandson," James said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "He always talked about the ranch passing through generations." The simple statement carried a weight of accusation, however unintended. James had been robbed of not only his son, but the continuation of his family legacy. His father had died never knowing a grandchild existed. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, the inadequate words slipping out before she could stop them. James studied her face, searching for something. After a moment, he sighed. "We can't change the past, Elena, but we control what happens now." He glanced at Samuel, engrossed in the train set. "He deserves to know his heritage, his family, this land that will someday be his." The presumption startled her. "James, we've only just returned. I haven't decided. Haven't decided what? Whether to allow me to be a father to my son, whether he'll inherit what is rightfully his." James's voice remained low, but intensity burned in his words. "Those aren't solely your decisions to make anymore, Elena. Not now that I know the truth." The tension in the room grew palpable, and Elena was grateful for Samuel's absorbed fascination with the train set. She kept her voice low, matching James's intensity. "I returned to Redemption Valley because I had nowhere else to go. My father's debts left us with nothing in San Francisco. Samuel's health was deteriorating. These weren't choices, James. They were necessities. And now that you're here, what are your plans?" His amber eyes searched hers. "Will you run again when circumstances change? Take my son away from me a second time?" The accusation stung, partly because Elena hadn't thought beyond immediate survival. "I don't know," she admitted. "I haven't had the luxury of planning for the future. Every day has been about making it to the next." Something in James's expression softened. He glanced at Samuel, then back to her. "I have a proposal." Before he could elaborate, Samuel called out excitedly, "Mama, Mr. Blackwood, look how fast the train can go around the track." They moved to the table where Samuel demonstrated his discovery, the moment of confrontation suspended. Elena watched as James knelt beside their son, showing him how to connect additional train cars, how to create switch points in the track. The easy rapport between them was undeniable, as if nature compensated for nurture, creating bonds that transcended years of absence. Later, as the afternoon light began to fade, James suggested they move to the kitchen for refreshments before the journey home. Samuel, tired from the excitement of the day but reluctant to see it end, followed slowly. "My housekeeper left apple pie," James explained, serving generous slices to each of them. "Mrs. Tolliver comes in 3 days a week. She's been with me since—" He paused, clearly about to say "since you left," but amended, "for several years now." Samuel, momentarily revived by the promise of dessert, took a large bite of pie. "This is even better than the ones at the bakery in San Francisco," he declared loyally. James smiled. "I'll tell Mrs. Tolliver you said so. She'll be pleased." As Samuel ate, James returned to their interrupted conversation. "About that proposal," he said quietly to Elena. "I'd like you both to move to the ranch." Elena nearly choked on her pie. "What? Not as... that is, I'm not suggesting..." James seemed uncharacteristically flustered. "The East Wing has separate quarters, complete privacy, originally built for my parents as they aged, though my father passed before it was finished. James, I can't possibly think of Samuel, he interrupted. The clean air, space to run and play, regular riding lessons. The doctor just a quick ride away if his breathing troubles return. No more cramped quarters, no more city dampness aggravating his lungs. Elena glanced at their son, who was fighting to keep his eyes open, exhaustion from the exciting day finally catching up with him. It's not that simple. It could be. James's voice dropped lower. I've spent 5 years building this ranch into something substantial, Elena, something worthy of passing down. Let me share it with my son, with both of you. The offer was tempting in ways Elena hadn't anticipated. The security of the ranch, the obvious benefits for Samuel's health, the relief from constant financial worry. These were practical considerations she couldn't dismiss. But beneath them lay more complicated emotions, the unresolved feelings between her and James, the guilt over her deception, the fear of becoming dependent on a man she had once believed betrayed her. I need time to think, she said finally. James nodded, accepting her response without pressing further. The offer stands, no strings attached. The phrase caught her attention. No strings. You'd be my guest, not my... He glanced at Samuel to ensure the boy wasn't listening closely. There would be no expectations beyond allowing me to be part of Samuel's life. Before Elena could respond, Samuel's head drooped forward and he nearly face-planted into his pie. James moved quickly, catching the boy before he could fall. Someone's had quite a day, he said gently, lifting Samuel into his arms with an ease that spoke of strength Elena had forgotten. I should get you both home before he's completely exhausted. The ride back to town was quiet. Samuel asleep against Elena's side in the wagon, James driving with confident hands on the reins. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land, gilding the prairie grasses in amber light. It was beautiful, Elena had to admit. This wild country that had shaped James, that was part of Samuel's heritage. He has your eyes, Elena said suddenly, breaking the companionable silence. I saw it from the moment he was born. James glanced sideways at her, surprise evident in his expression, surprise that she would volunteer such an intimate observation. What else? He asked softly. What else of mine does he have? Your stubbornness, Elena replied with a small smile. Your fascination with how things work, your gentleness with animals. She hesitated, then added, your temper sometimes, quick to flash, but just as quick to cool. James absorbed this with visible emotion. I've missed so much, he said, his voice rough, his first words, his first steps. His first word was book, Elena offered, a peace offering of sorts. He started walking at 10 months. Early, the doctor said. He's always been impatient to move forward, to explore. Like his father, James acknowledged with a hint of pride. Elena, regardless of what you decide about moving to the ranch, I want to be part of his life now, properly, officially. Elena tensed. What does that mean? It means I want to acknowledge him publicly as my son, give him my name. James kept his eyes on the road ahead, his profile strong against the darkening sky. He deserves that much. The prospect filled Elena with conflicting emotions. Samuel deserved his father's name, deserved the legitimacy and security it would provide. But such acknowledgement would formalize the scandal, confirm the whispers that had likely already begun in town. People will talk, she said, echoing his own warning from days earlier. Let them, James replied, using her own response against her. It's nothing I haven't endured before. As the wagon approached her father's house, Elena made a decision. Not about the ranch, that required more consideration, but about the more immediate concern. Tomorrow, she said. We'll see Doc Wilson in the morning, as you suggested. Then we can discuss the rest. James nodded. satisfaction evident in the set of his shoulders. It was a small concession, but they both recognized it for what it was, the first step toward building something new from the ruins of their past. Dr. Wilson's office occupied the ground floor of his home, a tidy white building at the edge of town. When Elena and Samuel arrived the next morning, James was already waiting for them, his horse tethered to the hitching post. The sight of him, freshly shaved, dressed in a clean shirt and his best riding coat, suggested this appointment held significance beyond mere medical consultation. "Good morning," he said, his eyes moving from Elena to Samuel with undisguised affection. "How are you feeling today, son?" "Good," Samuel replied, though Elena noticed he was breathing more heavily than usual after their short walk. The excitement of yesterday's activities had taken a toll, as she'd feared it might. Dr. Wilson received them immediately. He was older than Elena remembered, his hair and beard completely white now, but his blue eyes remained sharp and assessing behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss Cortez," he greeted her, then corrected himself. "Mrs. "Still Miss Cortez," Elena said firmly, ignoring James's quick glance in her direction. "I see." The doctor's gaze moved to Samuel, then to James, standing protectively nearby, and understanding dawned in his expression. Unlike most in town, Wilson had the discretion born of medical confidentiality. "And this young man must be Samuel. I understand you've been having some trouble with your breathing." The examination was thorough. Wilson listened to Samuel's lungs, checked his throat and ears, tested his reflexes, and asked detailed questions about his medical history. Elena provided the information requested, including the San Francisco doctor's diagnosis and prescribed treatments. James remained silent throughout, but his attention never wavered, absorbing every detail of his son's medical condition. "Well," Wilson said finally, helping Samuel back into his shirt, "you have what we call bronchial asthma. It's an inflammation of the air passages that makes breathing difficult, especially during exertion or exposure to certain irritants." "The San Francisco doctor called it weak lungs," Elena said. Wilson frowned. "An oversimplification. There's nothing inherently weak about Samuel's lungs. They simply react more strongly to certain triggers. The good news is that the dry air here will help considerably." He turned to Samuel with a kind smile. "You'll need to be careful about dust and pollen, young man, and perhaps avoid the most strenuous activities during the hottest part of the day, but otherwise, I see no reason why you can't live a normal, active life." Relief washed over Elena. The San Francisco physician had been far less optimistic, suggesting Samuel might always be frail, limited in his activities, possibly even confined to indoor occupations as an adult. "What about riding?" James asked, breaking his silence. "Is horse riding too strenuous?" "Not at all, in moderation," Wilson replied. "In fact, gentle exercise is beneficial, strengthens the lungs and overall constitution. I would suggest starting with short rides, gradually increasing as his stamina improves." He wrote out a prescription and handed it to Elena. "This tincture will help during acute episodes. Otherwise, fresh air, moderate exercise, and avoiding known triggers should manage the condition effectively." Outside the doctor's office, James couldn't contain his satisfaction. "You heard him. The ranch environment is precisely what Samuel needs. Clean air, moderate exercise, space to grow stronger without urban pollutants aggravating his condition." "I heard him," Elena acknowledged, tucking the prescription into her reticule. "But James, moving to the ranch is a significant decision. It's not just about Samuel's health." "What is it about then?" he challenged. "Your pride? Your reluctance to accept help from me after all this time?" The accusation hit uncomfortably close to the truth. "It's about independence," she countered. "About not becoming dependent on your charity." It's not charity when it's for my son, James replied, his voice softening as he glanced at Samuel, who was watching a butterfly nearby. Elena, I'm not offering this to control you or to assuage my guilt. I'm offering because Samuel deserves every advantage I can provide, including a healthy environment and his father's daily presence. Elena studied his face, searching for ulterior motives and finding only sincerity. I need to find employment, she said finally. I can't live on your generosity indefinitely, regardless of where we stay. As it happens, James replied, the school board meets tonight to discuss Mrs. Finch's replacement. Harlan Peterson mentioned you might be interested in returning to your former position. The news startled her. The school board would consider me, after everything? Times change, people change. James hesitated, then added, I may have mentioned to Reverend Taylor, who chairs the board, that your teaching experience in San Francisco would bring valuable new perspectives to our school. Elena's eyes narrowed. You've been planning this. Planning implies certainty of outcome, James corrected. I merely created an opportunity. The choice is still yours. Before she could respond, Samuel returned to them, his face flushed with excitement. Mama, I followed the butterfly all the way to those flowers. Can we get flowers for our house? Of course, mi corazon. She smoothed his curls, noting the slight wheeze in his breathing even from this minor exertion. Dr. Wilson's optimism notwithstanding, Samuel's condition remained a concern that weighed heavily in her considerations. I should let you two get that prescription filled, James said, sensing her need for space to think. The school board meets at 7 in the church hall if you're interested. And Elena, my offer stands. No strings. Just a chance for our son to have what he deserves. As he mounted Thunder and rode away, Elena watched his retreating figure with mixed emotions. The practical benefits of his proposal were undeniable. Samuel's health would almost certainly improve at the ranch. The financial security would relieve the constant worry that had been her companion for years. The teaching position would provide her with independence while allowing her to use her skills. But accepting meant acknowledging James's permanent place in their lives. It meant facing the town's judgment as the nature of their prior relationship and Samuel's parentage became publicly known. It meant navigating the complex emotions that still smoldered between them, neither love nor hate, but something unresolved, dangerous in its potential to reignite. Do you like Mr. Blackwood, Mama? Samuel asked suddenly as they walked toward the apothecary. The innocent question caught her off guard. Why do you ask? Samuel shrugged with childish simplicity. He looks at you the way Mr. Torres looked at Miss Abigail in the story you read me, like he's afraid to blink because you might disappear. The perceptiveness of children, Elena thought wryly. Even at 4, Samuel sensed currents between adults that they themselves barely acknowledged. Mr. Blackwood and I have a complicated history, she said carefully. Is it because I'm his son? Samuel asked, the question so unexpected that Elena stopped walking. Samuel, who told you that? Nobody told me. His amber eyes, James's eyes, regarded her seriously. But he has the same color eyes as me, and his hands are like mine, see? He held up his small hand, fingers splayed. And he looks at me the way Mr. Chen looked at his son in San Francisco, like he's counting all my fingers and toes to make sure I'm real. Elena knelt before her son, heart pounding. In all her careful planning, all her protective strategies, she had never prepared for this moment, for Samuel's quiet, matter-of-fact recognition of the truth she had tried to shield him from. Samuel, she began, searching for the right words. Why didn't you tell me you thought this before? He shrugged, the gesture heartbreakingly adult on his small shoulders. I didn't know for sure until yesterday, when he showed me how to guide Pepper with my legs, not just the reins. He said, that's it, just like that. and his voice sounded just like mine does in my head. Samuel looked at her with those amber eyes that matched James's perfectly. "Is that why we came here, Mama? To find my papa?" The simplicity of the question belied its complexity. How could she explain the tangle of pride, hurt, misunderstanding, and necessity that had brought them back to Redemption Valley? "No, mi corazon," she replied honestly. "We came because we needed a place to live after grandfather died. But yes, Mr. Blackwood is your father." Samuel absorbed this with remarkable calmness. "Does he want to be my papa?" "Very much," Elena whispered, her throat tight with emotion. "He didn't know about you until we came here. That was my fault, not his. I should have told him long ago." "Are you angry with him? Is that why you didn't tell him?" Out of the mouths of babes, Elena thought. "I was angry once," she admitted. "I thought he had hurt me very badly. But I was wrong, Samuel. I misunderstood something important, and instead of asking him about it, I ran away. Like when I thought Joey Watson stole my marble, but he was just keeping it safe because there was a hole in my pocket." A laugh escaped Elena despite the gravity of the moment. "Something like that, yes, much more complicated, but the same idea." Samuel nodded, processing this with remarkable maturity. "Will you tell him that I know, that he's my papa?" "Yes," Elena promised. "Today, but first we need to get your medicine." As they continued toward the apothecary, Elena's mind raced with implications. Samuel's awareness changed everything. Whatever personal reservations she harbored about accepting James's offer, her son's needs and desires now took precedence. He deserved a relationship with his father, not a tentative, carefully managed one, but a full acknowledgement of their bond. The school board meeting that evening took on new significance as well. If she accepted the teaching position, they would remain in Redemption Valley permanently. Samuel would grow up knowing his father, inheriting not just James's name, but his way of life, his connection to the land. By the time they reached home after filling the prescription, Elena had made her decision. She wrote a brief note and asked Harlan's son to deliver it to the Blackwood Ranch, then spent the afternoon helping Samuel prepare for an important introduction. "Are we going to tell everyone that Mr. Blackwood is my papa?" Samuel asked as she brushed his hair and helped him into his best shirt, the one she had been saving for special occasions. "Yes," Elena replied. "First at the school board meeting tonight, and then the rest of the town will know soon enough." "Will people be angry?" The innocent question pierced Elena's heart. "Some might not understand at first," she acknowledged, "but those who matter, those whose opinions truly count, will be happy for you." "For us," Samuel corrected with the simple wisdom of childhood. "For all three of us." The church hall was nearly full when they arrived. News of the school board meeting had drawn more than just the official members. Townsfolk of all descriptions had gathered, clearly anticipating that Elena's potential reinstatement as teacher would be discussed. James was already there, standing at the back of the room. He wore a formal suit rather than his usual ranch attire, and the sight of him, tall, imposing, yet somehow vulnerable in his formal clothes, caused a flutter in Elena's chest that she hadn't felt in years. He approached when he saw them, his expression serious. "You got my message about the meeting," he said to Elena, then smiled at Samuel. "Good evening, young man." Before Elena could respond, Samuel stepped forward, his small shoulders squared with determination. "Good evening, Papa." The word hung in the air between them, powerful in its simplicity, devastating in its impact. James froze, his eyes widening as he looked from Samuel to Elena seeking confirmation. "He figured it out himself," Elena explained softly. "He has your eyes, and your hands, and apparently, your voice." For a moment, James seemed incapable of movement or speech. Then, with deliberate care, he knelt to Samuel's level, bringing himself eye to eye with his son. "Samuel," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I would be honored to be your papa, if that's what you want." Samuel nodded solemnly. "Mama says it's why we came back to Redemption Valley, so I could know you." James's eyes met Elena's over Samuel's head, filled with gratitude and something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. "Your mama's very wise," he said, never breaking that gaze. The exchange did not go unnoticed. Around them, conversations faltered as people observed the tableau. Elena Cortez, her young son, and James Blackwood forming a family unit before their eyes. Whispers began, spreading through the hall like ripples in a pond. "I've been thinking about your offer," Elena said quietly to James, "about the ranch." "And?" Hope flickered across his features. "We accept, for Samuel's health, for his future." She took a deep breath. "For the chance to make things right between us, whatever that might mean." Before James could respond, Reverend Taylor called the meeting to order. The room settled, but the energy had shifted. Everyone had witnessed the moment between James and Samuel, had seen the unspoken communication between him and Elena. The story many had already suspected was now confirmed. As Elena moved to take a seat, James's hand caught hers briefly. "Thank you," he whispered, the simple words carrying the weight of 5 lost years of regret and hope and possibility. Samuel, seemingly oblivious to the stir he had caused, slipped his small hand into James's larger one with the easy acceptance of childhood. Together, the three of them faced the gathering, not yet a family reunited, but no longer strangers bound only by biology and obligation. 2 months later, Elena stood on the porch of the East Wing, watching the sun rise over Redemption Valley. The transformation in their lives since the school board meeting had been swift and profound. The board had voted unanimously to reinstate her as the town's teacher, effective after the Christmas holiday. For now, she was helping Mrs. Finch transition, spending mornings at the school and afternoons settling into life at the ranch. The move had been accomplished with surprising ease. James had the East Wing prepared with furniture that somehow matched her tastes perfectly. Simple, elegant pieces that reminded her of her childhood home, but with touches of sophistication she had admired in San Francisco. Their quarters were indeed private, connected to the main house by a covered walkway but distinctly separate. James had been scrupulously respectful of the boundaries she established, never entering their wing without invitation, always knocking before crossing the threshold. Samuel, for his part, had blossomed. The effects of the clean, dry air became evident within days. His breathing eased, his energy increased. The persistent cough that had plagued him in San Francisco all but disappeared. Dr. Wilson proclaimed himself delighted with the boys' progress at their follow-up appointment, predicting that with proper care, Samuel might outgrow the worst of his asthma entirely. But it was the relationship between father and son that had undergone the most remarkable transformation. James had embraced fatherhood with a devotion that moved Elena deeply. Each morning he took Samuel on a short ride around the ranch, teaching him the names of plants and animals, explaining ranch operations in terms a 4-year-old could understand. In the evenings, he read to Samuel from books carefully selected to ignite the boy's imagination, while teaching him about the heritage of the land he would someday inherit. The sound of laughter drew Elena's attention to the corral, where James was teaching Samuel how to groom Pepper. The boy stood on an overturned bucket, curry brush in hand, following his father's instructions with solemn concentration. James's hands hovered protectively nearby, ready to steady Samuel if needed. The scene tugged at Elena's heart. The boy and the man he so closely resembled, connected by blood and increasingly by the bonds of genuine affection, Samuel had taken to calling James Papa with the easy acceptance of childhood, while James spoke the word son with reverent pride, as if still marveling at the gift he had nearly lost forever. Their relationship was healing, but what of hers with James? The question lingered in the spaces between them, in glances that lasted too long, in the careful distance they maintained even as they collaborated in Samuel's care. "Mrs. Tolliver says breakfast is ready," a voice called from behind her. Elena turned to find James approaching, Samuel perched on his shoulders, small hands clutching his father's hat. "We brushed Pepper until she was shiny, Mama," Samuel announced proudly. "I can see that," Elena replied, noting the fine dust covering both father and son. "But I think the horse isn't the only one who needs grooming now." James grinned, lifting Samuel down from his shoulders. "Go wash up, son. I need a word with your mother." When Samuel had gone inside, James turned to Elena, his expression becoming serious. "I received a letter from the territorial court yesterday. They've officially processed the documentation. Samuel is legally recognized as my son and heir. His birth certificate has been amended to show the Blackwood name." "That was fast," Elena observed, though she wasn't surprised. James's influence in the territory had grown considerably in the years of her absence. "I wanted it settled before Christmas." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else I'd like to settle before the holiday if you're willing to discuss it." The cautious formality in his tone alerted her that this was no casual conversation. "Go on." "Our situation is unusual," James began, "living separately under one roof, sharing responsibility for Samuel while maintaining the fiction that we're merely cooperating for his benefit." "Is it fiction?" Elena asked quietly. "We are cooperating for his benefit." "You know what I mean." James's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "The town gossip has settled somewhat, but there are still whispers, questions about our arrangement, about whether we intend to properly legitimize our family." Elena's heart quickened. "Are you proposing, James?" "I'm asking if you would consider it." His amber eyes, so like Samuel's, held hers steadily. Not out of obligation or for appearances, but because despite everything, the misunderstandings, the lost years, the pain we've caused each other, there's still something between us worth building on. Elena looked away, focusing on the distant mountains. "How can you be so certain? We're different people now than we were 5 years ago." "I'm not certain of anything except this. I never stopped loving you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. "Even when I believed you had left me without explanation, even when I thought I'd never see you again." The anger faded, Elena, but the love remained. The words pierced the armor she had built around her heart. "James, you don't have to answer now," he interrupted gently. "Just think about it, about what we could be, not what we were, but what we might become together." Before she could respond, Samuel burst back onto the porch, face freshly scrubbed, hair still damp. "Papa, Mrs. Tolliver says the pancakes are getting cold, and she made the apple ones that I like best." James smiled, the intensity of the moment breaking. "Well, we can't let good pancakes go to waste, can we?" He reached down and lifted Samuel into his arms in one fluid motion, then extended his free hand to Elena. "Coming." The simple gesture held such meaning, an invitation not just to breakfast but to consider a shared future, to take the first step toward healing the final breach between them. After a moment's hesitation, Elena placed her hand in his. Together they crossed the threshold into the main house, the morning sunlight casting their elongated shadow across the porch, a single silhouette of a man, a woman, and the child between them. Later that day, as winter's first snow began to dust the distant peaks, a photographer arrived from Carson City. James had arranged the sitting weeks earlier, explaining that he wanted a proper family portrait before Christmas, something to mark this new beginning. "Where shall we take it?" the photographer asked, surveying the ranch with a professional eye. The front porch of the main house, James decided, with the valley behind us. They positioned themselves carefully, James standing tall in his best clothes, Elena beside him in a burgundy dress that complemented her dark hair. Samuel stood in front of them, James's hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. "The young man needs to move closer to his father," the photographer instructed, making minute adjustments to their positions. Without prompting, Samuel stepped directly in front of James and reached up. James lifted him effortlessly, settling the boy against his side where he fit as naturally as if they had never been separated. Samuel's arm went around his father's neck, his small face alight with happiness and belonging. "Perfect," the photographer said from behind his camera. "Now, Mother, a bit closer to them both." Elena hesitated only briefly before stepping to James's side. His free arm encircled her waist, drawing her gently against him until the three of them formed a single unit. Not the family they might have been, but the family they were becoming. In that moment, captured forever in the photograph that would hang above their fireplace for decades to come, Elena finally came home. Not to a place, but to a person. To the truth that love, once genuine, could survive even years of solitude and misunderstanding. To the realization that in finding each other again, they had all found themselves.